Here we go. Aloha, my name is Makani, and today we'll be presenting our story map on Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge. Oh, kalamai. Didn't share it. And so here is our story map. It is located in the ahupua'a of Hanalei, the moku of Halelea, and the mokupuni of Kauai. And so as Lilia and Heather mentioned, in partnership with Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge, Huli'aʻaupapa developed this internship. And this story map is a consolidated version of our ethnohistorical research report. And so once we have that report finalized, you'll be able to click this button here and it'll take you to that full report. But this story map is just the shorter, more interesting version. And so ethnohistorical research is historical information with a focus on culture. And it's important as it connects us back to these places and reinforces our relationship to these places. And this research also honors this fahi with our time and our mana. And so listed here are some references on where we got our information. And to the right is a historical map from the Hawaii State Archives of the project area. And so first I'll be going over Inoa Aina. And Inoa Aina are place names, and they are important as they hold a source of knowledge that reflect the values and society of the culture of Hawaii. And Inoa Aina also reflect the genealogy of the Aina, and each specific place is a reflection of its history and different features. And so once I have the Inoa Aina table published, you'll be able to click here within the next few weeks. Yeah. And so on the island of Kauai, there are 5 moku, and located in the moku of Halelea in this purple fill here is where the Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge is located. And in the dark purple fill is the refuge. And this is also an interactive map, so you guys can click around to the different moku and see like the different acres and some other information here. Within the moku of Halelea, there are 9 ahupua'a. And so in the light purple shade is the ahupua'a of Hanalei, and in the dark is Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge. And the refuge was established in 1972, and it is the oldest of Kauai's 3 refuges, and it was established under the Endangered Species Act to recover threatened and endangered species. And so some Inoa Aina located directly within the refuge. Here are some Hawaiian words I'll be using within the next couple of slides. So ahupua'a is a land division extending from uplands to the sea. Ili Aina is a land section or a smaller portion of an ahupua'a. Pu'u is a hill, peak, or portion, and Kahawai, stream, river, or gulch. And here is the maps I'm going to be using to kind of give you guys an idea of where these place names are. So this is an 1893 map created by Walter Wall. And then here's the link for Kipuka database, which is the other reference I'll be using for those Inoa Aina. And so first is Puapua Ho'i, and Puapua Ho'i is an Ili Aina referenced in the LCA document of Kaialawekeʻau. So in this yellow outline is Kaialawekeʻau's dimension of his property. And so this is located within the Ili of Puapua Ho'i. Next is Kaukaʻopua. And so on this map, it's referenced as Ka'auaupuna, Ka'auaupua. And so depending on which source, it's either Kaukaʻopua or Ka'auaupua. And so Kaukaʻopua translates to the horizon clouds alight and is a pu'u or triangulation. Next is Halua'alo, and Halua'alo is an Ili Aina mentioned in the LCA document of Namauu. And so this is the outline of Namau'u's property and then the Ili of Halua'alo. And lastly, Hakanawaliwali. And so Hakanawaliwali is located right to the left of Halua'alo, and it is an Auai and Ili Aina mentioned in the LCA document of Namauu. And now I put 2 historical maps next to each other here. And on the left, this image here is the 1856 picture. And then on the right, if it'll let me, there we go, is a 1923 picture. So here you can see this picture was taken before the Hanalei Bridge was built in 1912. And then here you can see that. And you can also see the new road, and a storm in the late 1800s or early 1900s took out all of these houses here. And next I'll be talking about ua. And ua is rains, and rains are important for the survival of plants and animals, along with recharging our underground aquifers. And Kanaka Maoli have a deep understanding, a deep relationship with the elements, and are detailed observers of our surroundings. And so Kanaka knew that one wahi or location can have several rains with unique features, and as each individual rain describes the characteristics of that rain. And so first we have Hehipuahala, and this translates to rain that treads upon the pendamis flowers. And this was referenced to be located at Po'okuheau, which is on the eastern boundary of the refuge. Next, we have Kanilehua, and so there's three possible translations for Kanilehua. The first is rain that lehua flowers drink. The second, rain that makes lehua flowers rustle. And the third, a mist-like rain peculiar to the lehua forest is the mist that that drinks the lehua blossom. And this is located in Hanalei, but it derives from Hilo during the time of Chief Hanakahi, and it's also mentioned in the mele Ika Ua Kanilehua. Next, we have Ho'eha Ili, and this translates to the rain that hurts the skin. And this is from the mele Maikai Kauai. And our last ua is loku, and loku refers to deep emotion, pain, or sorrow, and it derives from the chant Ula Novell. And this was a Kauai chant that the people of Kauai used when they were learning the letters of this island, and it was later revised into a mele inoa, or a name song for Kapi'olani, who's the granddaughter of Kamoli'i. So next is makani, and so makani is wind, and wind is important as it carries heat, moisture, pollutants, and pollen to different areas. And Native Hawaiians respected nature because as Kanaka, we are connected to all things that surround us, to plants and creatures, rocks in the sea, and the sky and earth. And so with an intimate understanding of our environment, Native Hawaiians have a vast vocabulary for weather and a nuanced understanding of the winds of their home. And similar to Inoa Aina and Ua, winds facilitate the recollection of these places that they occurred. And so first we have Luhau o Hanalei Uka, and this translates to scattered dews of upland Hanalei. And this is considered a life-giving wind located in Hanalei. Next, we have Luhau o Lanihuli, and this is a gentle cool wind of Lanihuli. And so when this wind blew, fishermen considered it a lucky omen and headed straight for the river or the sea. And this is an image from Brother Bertram, and it's located, this is in Hanalei River. Next, we have Olaniu o Pu'upoa, and this translates to the coconut leaf piercing wind of Pu'upoa. And Pu'upoa is located in the Mulivai, where Hanalei River meets the sea, kind of near Hanalei Pier. Next, I'll be going over some Olelo No'eau. And Olelo No'eau have long contributed to the perpetuation of traditional knowledge, and they're important as they are creative expressions used in the Hawaiian language, but they also integrate observational knowledge within educational values, history, and humor. And so these Olelo No'eau are from Pukui's book and Judd's. First, we have Ha'e Kamanu Ke Ale Nei Kawai, and this translates to tear up the birds, the water is surging. And Ha'e refers to when the birds step on like the outside of kalo, and then it creates those ripples. So similar here, except you just have to imagine that he's stepping on a kalo. And next we have Ka'ua Loku o Hanalei. and this translates to the pouring rain of Hanalei. Next is Kalimu Kanaka o Manu'akepa, the man-throwing algae of Manu'akepa. And so since Hanalei is known for its loku, its pouring rain, Manu'akepa is the slippery algae that grows after it downpours for days, weeks on end. And when it's carelessly stepped on, one can slip and fall. And so this Manu'akepa is mentioned in various mo'olelo and mele, and it's known for Hanalei. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Kavika.
Ano ai, Niki aloha ia kākoa whakahia pau, o wano Kavika Espili, I keiki he kamana ho'i, na ka mokupuni o Maui, ahupua o Waikuli, makaili aina o Kapuna Kea. Aloha everybody, my name is Kavika. I'm a master's student in Hawaiian Studies Department, and I am a keiki, a child of Maui, from the ahupua Waikuli and the ili aina of Kapuna Kea. So continuing off of what Makani was mentioning with Olelo no Eao, kind of segues perfectly into mele, which a lot of our Olelo no Eao, our traditional sayings, are captured within mele and also within mo'olelo. And so a mele is a song, an anthem, a chant of any kind, poem, poetry, and to sing and to chant. And mele were used to record events and intimate ties to land, also used to celebrate the sexual union of chiefs and their offspring in mele ma'i, and also to express patriotism and the love of the land. So mele are important because prior to the introduction of written language, all of Olelo Hawaii and Hawaiian culture, knowledge, history, mo'olelo, everything in our whole worldview was captured through oral transmission. So mele was one of those ways and forms of expression. And post overthrow and then subsequent suppression of the Hawaiian language in public schools, the mele were one of the kipuka or like safe haven kind of pu'uhonuas that Kanaka were able to express themselves and speak their language freely and be able to also pass down ike. So one of the important functions of mele is that they mention pahipana and they highlight various important place names, and also, like I mentioned, they also refer to traditional sayings or olelo no eao, such as the one that Makani had mentioned, Kalimu Kanaka o Manu'akepa. And one of the most important things, in my opinion, is that it represents the world view of our kupuna, and it captures the way they view the world. And so here's some of the Hanalei Ahupua Mele that we've compiled, and here's just a list of some of them. And then I also wanted to highlight a couple of them and play a few for you. So here is Hano Hano Hanalei. So Hano Hano Hanalei was composed by Alfred Alohikea, who is arguably one of the most prolific composers that composed around Hanalei area and in Kauai. And so within the mele, he says hano hano Hanalei, kaua nui. So Hanalei is famous for choke rain, like, which is pretty synonymous. It's a olalo no eau, kaua loku o Hanalei, and also ties into the manua kepa, which I'm going to go into a little bit more with a little clip of Kupuna Mahuiki talking about the pilina between the big rains and the manua kepa is when it would start to grow off of the aina. So here is Nani Hanalei. And this is Nani Hanalei by Kai Davis. Is also sung by him, which I thought was a cool little aspect of the mele, and it kind of reflects the time period, just the sound of it. And the reason why I included this is because it talks about the ualoha, which is aloha is to droop, is to hang. So it's another way of saying ualoku or uanui that isn't commonly heard. So I thought that was really interesting that they put that in there. And so mele, most times mele pretty much stick to the same script and stay the same and are repeated verbatim. Whereas mo'olelo, there are different versions, there are different mana or versions that may have different nuances depending on what locality the storyteller is from. So mo'olelo is a story, a tale, a myth, history, tradition, and literature. And so what's important about mo'olelo is not only is it a story, but it represents history and our traditions, and it comes from a contraction of the word mo'o and olelo, or a succession of talk, which kind of goes into how Hawaiian was, how ʻike was transmitted, how knowledge was transmitted in Hawaiian, which is verbally. Okay, sorry. And then, so one mo'olelo I wanted to highlight was the mo'olelo of Lonui Kamakahiki, or Ka'i Nui Mamao. And so he was the son of Keawenui Umi and the chief of Ka'u and Puna. And another important thing is Lonui Kamakahiki. So the Kumulipo, or the Hawaiian cosmogony chant, probably the greatest hits of our mo'opuauhau, ko'ihonua, or genealogical chants was composed in his honor. And so the story goes that Lonui Kamakahiki was really jealous of his wahine. His wahine was so beautiful. Her name was Kaikilani. And so he was so jealous of her beauty. I think one time they were playing konane, and she beat him in konane, and he went crazy, and he ended up beating her to death. And so after this, he just went into sorrow and grieving and kind of lost his mind. They say he went pupule, and so he started wandering around all of the islands, making his way around all the way to Kauai, to where he lived in the wilderness. And so all of his attendants at that time were just like kind of fed up. They dug out on him. But one of the Kauai chiefs, his name was Kapa'ihia Hilina, he followed Lono into the wilderness and made sure he was taken care of. And it said that there were, he really lost his mind in the wilderness over there and in the uplands. And so they said they were wandering around with malo made of tea leaves, and their food that they ate were mai'a, wild mai'a, or wild bananas, and also the hala fruit. And it was said that when Kapa'ihi used to feed him or give him food, he'd get the banana and he would give him the meat or the i'o of the banana, and then he would eat the peel. And so when after some time, he finally regained his senses, and he ended up returning to Hawaii Island and becomes this benevolent chief, and also takes Kapa'ihi with him, who becomes his attendant, his favorite attendant. And so after a lot of the Hawaii Island chiefs were jealous of him, so they started gossiping about him and spreading rumors. But and so he kind of got out of the just chief's Lono's good graces. But after he's seen this he composed this chant that was commemorating his time in the uplands with Lono'i Kamakahiki, and it was like, no, like we've been, I was there with the Uaikis and the Uanuis. I was there with you through thick and thin. Where were all these chiefs? And so this is a little excerpt from that chant, and I'm just gonna read it out. Inu aku I ka awa ko'u, I ka awa lau hinalo a'ala. Awa ono mamala hoe, he hoa e, he kaupu e lono e, he kanaka au no ka uaiki, ina ho'i ha he hoa au na ka uaiki la pai. He hoa I ka nahele lauhala loloa, mai ki lau ea I ka hili la. O ka hala I aina kepa ia I ka manu, o po'oku I Hanalei la. So in this excerpt, he's talking about the area of Hanalei that we're doing the project on. And so Ko'u is deep into the mountains, and it's talking about how they were drinking this awa in Ko'u, and awa also is significant of like figuratively used in Hawaiian understanding. Awa is like, Inui Kawai Awa, famous saying from Kamehameha. It's like the bitter waters. It's like hard fought through the hard times. He was there and drinking the awa, and it was the awa lau hinalo, the fragrant leaf awa of Mamalahoa. And another interesting thing that it talks about is it mentions this lau halaloloa, and so it was said that there was these huge this lauhala grove that spanned, like he says, my Kilauea I Kahili. So all the way from Kilauea to Kahili. And Hala also was synonymous with Po'oku, which is one of the heiau that's in the holdings area. And so another mo'olelo I want to share is actually a snippet from Kaleo Hawaii, and it is an interview of Kupuna Rachel Mahuiki, and she's talking about this Manua Kepa, and I'm gonna just play a little snippet for you guys here.
Na alfe alohi ke ano me na himeni e ai o Hanalei ano Hanalei kaua loku
a ke ia puana piliana I ka limu o Manua
Kepa. Ai ke ia limu a ale wa mapopo I na Honolulu nei loa ke ia ano limu, but I ko mako wahi ha ena me Hanalei no kaua nui kaua ale ua likupu ho kaila e lua la e holo la ke ua a mau pule ina ale ho kai main e ke ia ano limu ke o e hele aku ilu no ko mau ko humea ko hupela ke o e hehi o paki ka oe ale oe koe paki ka oe paki ka oe oi ka me uluai ke ia ano limu
no ka nui o
kaua man.
Yeah, so in that little mo'olelo that the Kupuna Mahuiki is giving, she's talking about this Manua Kepa, which is also synonymous with Hanalei, and it's a limu that grows out of the aina, out of the grass. And she was just talking about like ale no mapopo ina ulu keia ma Honolulu ne. So she's saying I don't think this limu grows on. I don't know if this grows in Honolulu, but Koma ko aina ma ha'ena ma and Hanalei ulunui keia. So our lands, this is where it grows, and and she talks about it's not just it doesn't grow when it rains 1-2 days. Like this comes when there's multiple weeks of rain, and goes to talk about that uoloku, kaua nui, that plenty rain that comes and it grows out of the aina. And she says, kehehi oi, pakiko oi, or kehehi, pakiko oi. So when you step on it, it's so slippery, you slip down, you fall down, and it's, that's with the saying, kalimu ka kanaka, the limu that throws, the man throwing limu of Manu Akepa, and it's like, it's so slippery, it throws you, and throws you down to the ground. And so next I'm going to talk about the historical landscape. And so over the years, there has been a lot of different things that have grown, or different kind of topography based on ownership and who was the caretakers and stewards of the aina. And so it was said that on Kauai, the extensive area from Hanalei to Waimea was a principal Hōʻike planting area. So there was extensive growth of Hōʻike in that area. And there's also, as you can, still to this present day, there's extensively terraced with lo'i kalo or taro patches. And then here's just going back to the Kuleana lands that Makani had pulled earlier or talked about. So there's taro patches in Kahui, Kahui's aina, and Kahakana Vali also had kalo land. And so there just talks about the extensiveness of kalo being grown within that area, and the production and abundance within the Hanalei area. And so in 1842, Godfrey Rhodes, who was an Englishman, and John Bernard, who was a Frenchman, started the first large-scale coffee plantations in Hanalei. And within a few years, they reached about 1,000 acres of coffee. But because of this, if they would have understood and heeded to this traditional sayings of kupuna, of the ua loku, ka ua nui, ka ua aloha, they would have understood like this aina, it's probably not the best for coffee. And maybe they would have chose a different area or been able to predict this flood that occurred in 1847, which took out about half. I'm pretty sure it decimated their entire field, and they were only able to get it back to maybe 50% of what it originally was out of the 1,000 acres. So they learned their lesson a few years later. In 1856, Rhodes sold off their interest to R.C. Wiley, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the kingdom. And so Wiley decided to switch it up, and instead of growing coffee, started growing sugar cane. And as the sugar production increased along with the production of kalo and coffee farms, rice also began to flourish with the introduction from the Pake or the Chinese, and was grown heavily up until the 1930s, and when the demand of rice dropped, and then kalo growth increased, the demand of kalo increased. And so I also wanted to include just a Manaleo's perspective, or Kupuna's perspective of the topography and the historical landscape. And so this is comes from Kohoku of Hawaii in 1943. And so I translated this. Sorry if it's not the best translation, but it pretty much says it was planted with mulberry, sugarcane, pineapple, and coffee. It was on the land that Princeville Sugar Plantation stood, and in 1878 and 1879, they transitioned to sugar planting above the lands of Hawaii Iloa. The mill still stood until the death of the sugar plantations in 1892 and 1893 with the McKinley Act. And with sugar planting complete, they returned to raising cattle, and the valley was still extensively being cultivated with rice, kalo, cattle, and new kalo varieties, which suspect is possibly long based upon the needs are changing. And then so currently this region is being stewarded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and was bought from the Eagle County Development Corporation in 1972. So mahalo nui. Just gonna open it up for any questions or mana'o that from any of the audience members.
Hanalei, thank you, Makani and Kobika, for sharing all your hard work and research that you guys have been doing over the last several months. It is a lot, and just to share, this is only just a little bit of the snippet of what they've kind of uncovered over the last several months. This is kind of like their highlights. They again have a larger document. After it's reviewed, it will be linked in this story map. And then we're also hoping that this story map will be an interactive resource for anybody in the Hanalei area. And we hope that that you folks enjoy this. But if you folks have questions, we'd love to hear it. So please go ahead and unmute yourself. I don't see anything in the chat. So we'd love to hear from you folks. Kalamai, sorry, we all have our volumes on mute. Hang on one second. Maka'ala?
Mahalo for this presentation. It's wonderful. I have a couple of things. One is my understanding, and I am a student of Tutu Rachel. There's a wonderful old video of her walking on the